gentlemen, welcome back to the CSTV. I'm your host, Kathleen Egaltato, Madam CS, and this is The Striker. Stay tuned and have a true and thrill. The Striker today leads us to the recent developments in Kenya. What is happening? Kunani? There is a suggestion that the Kenyan government is going to open its borders with Somalia. Now, a boss kidogo, we need to understand where Kenya Somalia relations are coming from and what led to the closure of these borders, and now ask ourselves whether is this the right time that actually these borders are being opened. Kenya and Somalia have had both good and, let me say, bad relations. When you look at the Kenyan citizens and the Somalia citizens, actually they agree on a lot of things. We have a lot of Somalia brothers and sisters in the country actually who are doing business, and if you go to Isiri, it's like a small Mogadishu. We have a lot of our Somali brothers and sisters doing the businesses there, and we really benefit from that particular business hub. We also have our brothers and sisters in the Kenyan ones actually doing businesses and working even in Somalia. But when you look at Kenya and Somalia at state level, there seems to be a state of fragility in terms of their diplomatic ties, and this has always been from border dispute point of view. If you go back to history during the Kenyatta era, you realize that the conflict between Kenya and Somalia in terms of the border was on the northern frontier district, and this dates back to the colonial period when the British actually came and they drew arbitrarily borders and separated communities, where they thought was supposed to be a border. They just put it there without the locals, all the natives being included in these determinations of the boundaries. And then at the same time, when you look at the Kenya, the Somalia flag, it is a star. It's a 5-pointed star, and one of these stars actually represents Somaliland that was actually penetrated, like a penetration of Somalia to Kenya, because there is part of Somalia that actually, when the British left the country, they didn't exactly say or indicate whether is this the Kenyan border or is it the Kenyan land or it is the Somali land. So when you look at the way these arbitrary boundaries were drawn, and then you look at the legacy of the first president in the country, where the North Frontier District was the point of contention, and there was a war there, and there were lots of fights and people died. And then you come up to 2013, 2014, when Kenya and Somalia again starts a conflict, or a dispute over the Malta in Boundary. And as a result, we saw Somalia take Kenya to the International Court of Justice, and in 2022, the International Court of Justice decided to actually rule the case, not favoring any country per se, but instead of going the way Somalia was claiming its border, or the way Kenya was claiming its border, then the equidistance policy in terms of Malta and boundaries was used. And in that particular case, we saw Somalia getting part of what it wanted, but what we saw is that President Kenyatta at that particular time saying that Kenya will not accept not even an inch of what it actually claims to be its land be given away. I remember I did at least 3 videos on the Kenya-Somalia conflict in terms of the Maltine dispute and the triangle, all the area where they were fighting on, etc. But now, because of those, unsolved issues, the border dispute in the Maltine whatever has not been solved, and the Northern Frontier District border issue has also been well solved. Then we also have this aspect where the Somalis in Kenya feel like they have been marginalized and they have been discriminated by the Kenyan government over decades, something that started during the colonial period, that even during independence is 6 years down the line, they feel that they are kind of marginalized, they are profiled, etc. So you realize that there are so many conflicts that have been ensuing between the two countries in a silent mode kind type. And then comes in the Al-Shabaab thing. Kenya has been a casualty of Al-Shabaab. Like, Al-Shabaab have hit Kenya, and I remember the worst Al-Shabaab attack in Kenya was the Garissa University attack, where we lost 147 students, and may their souls rest in eternal peace. And out of this, fragility, there's no even trust now between the two countries. It reached a point where Kenya suspended the Somalia embassy, and Somalia also suspended the Kenya embassy. Like, there was no much communication. There was even a time where trade between Kenya and Somalia in terms of miraa was at jeopardy, etc. Now, those borders have been closed for a long time. I can't exactly remember the year they were closed, but those borders were closed because of these unsolved issues. There's the Al-Shabaab menace, there's the border dispute issues, there's the maritime conflict, there's unresolved diplomatic ties and economic ties, and these borders were closed. So Kenya and Somalia, in terms of the closure of the borders, comes from this particular background of so many things that have been not fully explored and resolved to have a common agreement as neighboring countries. But now, the other day, from nowhere, it was announced that there's a suggestion that the Kenya-Somali borders should be opened, and within that particular month, only 1 month, around more than 20 people were killed out of Al-Shabaab attacks. And when I watched the news and the way the reporters were putting it, it is something that it's worth attention and it's worth alarming. And the two countries, citizens in the two countries should be able to ask themselves, is this the right time to do this? Of course, opening the borders for the two countries could be one of the best things to do, because one, Somalia has always wanted to be part of the East Africa community. And therefore, if Somalia happens to be part of the East Africa community, then the free movement of goods and trade protocol will have to apply. And in that particular case, Kenya does not have an option other than to open its borders to Somalia. But as it is right now, we do not even know whether Somalia will be fully accepted as a member of the East Africa community after its application. But now, without that membership, Kenya opening its borders, what will be the advantage that Kenya will get from opening the borders between Somalia and her? The thing here is, one, Kenya may benefit economically because then there is that easy movement of goods and services, and the common citizen, when I'm talking, the common mwananchi can also be able to benefit, because then there will be no much hindrances in terms of entering Somalia or entering Kenya. That could mean economic prosperity for the business and for the business people and other traders. But when you look at the country in terms of security, I think a lot needs to be looked at. Number one, how is Kenya and Somalia ready to sit down and negotiate the Al-Shabaab menace in the country? Because they normally say that at all times, state's interest takes precedency over the state security. The security of the citizens takes precedency over any other interest. So how willing are the two states ready to come down and sit down and say, we have to fight this Al-Shabaab as a common enemy, and not look like one country is intruding? Because for a long time, Somalia accused the Kenya Defense Forces from Kenya as intruding in Somalia's affairs. Kenya's intervention into Somalia through Operation Rinda Inchi, which later alone what combined with the AMISOM, was seen as intrusion. So the question is Somalia again ready right now to accept Kenya and sit down and discuss the fight against Al-Shabaab as two states facing the common enemy? Number two, these borders So one of the reasons why it was closed is because there was fragile diplomatic ties between Kenya and Somalia. The question is, as the two countries actually sat down to agree on their foreign policy towards each other? And specifically, when we took each other to the International Court of Justice and the ruling was given, and Kenya swore it will not accept even an inch of its land to be taken away, and Somalia also swore that it will take away what rightfully belonged to it. The question is, did these states actually sit down? And when I'm talking about the states, I'm looking even at the presidents and the ministers of foreign affairs in these two categories, and the ministers of interior in the two countries, whether actually they sat down and agreed on the way forward now that the ICJ had given its ruling. So the question is, these countries have taken each other to the International Court of Justice. It has a very firm stand concerning this boundary, all this area that is being disputed. So the question is, have they agreed whose land is it, or how are they going to explore resources in that particular place? So you realize that, for me, I feel there's a lot about Kenya and Somalia that needs to be solved, and they should be able to have bilateral agreements and memorandums of understanding before even they talk. Kenya speaks of opening the borders. And then another thing, security was also one of the reasons as to why those borders were closed. My question is, what has the government of Kenya done, and what has the government of Somalia done to ensure that that border is secure and it is not taken advantage of by, you know, traders of small illegal arms and light weapons? You know, the warlords take advantage of such borders, easily accessible borders, to sneak in and out illegal weapons and guns. So the question is, what have they done? Have they even constructed, added police posts, or even GSU camps or police camps there? Have they added the number of police officers patrolling that particular border? Do we have security alarm systems and very quality infrastructure in terms of communication, transport along that particular border, that just in case there's an attack, these two countries can be able to put efforts together to counter-attack? So I just feel like, so long as that one has not been done, so long as President Ruto has not negotiated any memorandum of understanding and any bilateral agreement between Kenya and Somalia in terms of that border and its operation, so long as President Ruto and the President of Somalia have not agreed on the maritime boundary in Kenya and in Somalia, so long as they have not agreed on the so many issues that are being raised by the Somalia brothers and sisters in this particular country, opening that border, it's not yet time. I think the government of Kenya needs to choose its delegate wisely, and the government of Somalia choose its delegate wisely. They sit down, they agree on the way forward in terms of diplomatic ties between these particular two countries, and more importantly, how they are going to work together as neighbors to secure that particular border. Without that, opening that border is just opening doors for Al-Shabaab to come in, and then we will continue the normal profiling and, you know, seeing people from the north as, you know, all the Somalis as the terrorists, which is not always the case, because you open that border, you leave it vulnerable, and then Al-Shabaab and other criminal elements, the warlords, will use it for their own ways, and then you start profiling the common citizenry, and it will make even worse the relationship between Kenya and Somalia. So a memorandum of understanding is needed, bilateral agreement is needed, and a clear foreign policy towards each other between the two countries is needed before that border is open. It is your host, Madam CS, the host with Indonese, and it is a bye-bye from me. Kindly remember to subscribe, like, and share this particular video. See you next time.